The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everybody. How are you? It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is the program where we talk to journalists about all different things going on in the Bronx and maybe the larger world around us. And you weren't here, but we've already started the discussion with Joseph Konig from the Norwood News. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks a lot, Gary. It's good to be here.
And the reason I say that, Joe and I were already knee-deep at the current events and politics before you all joined us. And we're going to be joined by Michael Benjamin at the New York Post for the second half of our show. Joe, everything going good at the paper?
Yeah, everything's going well.
Now, you had been an intern, and now your career is transformed a little bit?
Yeah, I'm trying to find work in all sorts of places, but David Cruz of the Norwood News has always been very kind to me, and I love working for him, so it's been great, yeah.
Let's get right into it. Let's start off with, I guess, a follow-up piece you did. I got both of the articles here. The tenants at a Stag-owned building complained about the property in general. Now, I want to pull out the address. What is the address? Do you know it offhand?
Yeah, it's 2985 and 2987 Webster Avenue.
Webster Avenue.
Yeah, it's Bedford Park.
Right, and so, like so many in the Bronx, they're complaining about what's going on. Now, you followed up with an article that says they're ramping up their demand. So that means the first one you wrote in October was good, right, but it didn't have any effect, and their complaints didn't have any effect, and they're still talking about the same things.
Well, like you said, like like many in the Bronx, these people are not happy with their living conditions. But what's different about this building as compared to many of the buildings in the Bronx is that it's a brand new building. It was built 3 years, or is opened 3 years ago. I mean, they're basically brand new. Stag is he's working on other projects. He just opened a building, like a couple blocks north of there. And so the reason they're so upset is because they moved into this brand new building expecting it to be brand new, and there's all these problems with security concerns, safety concerns, cleanliness, and so forth.
Cleanliness, like public areas are not kept.
Yeah, like the hallways are dirty, security cameras are being torn out of the ceilings with like loose wires. Yeah, and
wait, torn out like by residents?
Yeah.
See, that's not good. And then on one level, you can blame the property owner because of course it's their job to maintain it. On the other hand, people can't behave that way. I'm sorry.
No, of course. And one of the problems is that this is affordable housing. This is a lot of it's Section 8 housing, and so there's these people here who are living with mental illness, and part of the problem is it's obviously the landlord should keep their buildings up to check, but part of the problem is that there's these people here and they're left alone. They don't have access to social services. The mental health infrastructure in this country, as we know, is not up to par, and that's a fact in New York City. That's a fact everywhere. And so I talked with Mark Stagg, the CEO of the Stagg Group, which runs and operates this building, for the story, and his case was like, as a landlord, I can do as much as I can, but if someone's holding the elevator until the elevator shuts down, like holding the elevator door until the elevator door shuts down, there's not much he can do about that except come and fix the elevator.
And then of course, just the trickle down of that is that impacts everybody because it costs money, et cetera, et cetera.
And so the residents are upset, and to Stagg's credit, the residents say things have gotten a little bit better. They're not. Since we wrote the first article, they're still not great. They've been doing a lot of work with the Bedford-Mosholu Community Association, which is a very active group in Bedford Park and in Norwood, and now they've got a meeting scheduled on the docket with Community Board 7's Land Use Committee, and Stagg has agreed to send a representative there as well. So that's next month. So hopefully they'll be able to work some of these things out.
This is the kind of thing that just irks me all the time.
Yeah.
Is that when you make a plan for a building and you know maybe you're bringing in Section 8 tenants, maybe you're acknowledging that some of them may have various issues, whether it be, a diagnosed mental illness or people with other kinds of problems or come out of other shelters or other situations. You've got to have social services. It has to be built into the project. Now, we have many projects in the Bronx where this is done, where they say we're opening it up, but we're providing supportive services. I'm not looking to blame anybody or Stagg or anybody else, but the planning of these things, if that's the tenant you have, even if not, you always have to have some kind of services in an urban building. That would be based on me sitting in this chair for more than 2 decades. I see it all the time.
Of course, and I think it's emblematic of a systematic problem. Like, Mark Stagg is not the best landlord in the city, but he's by far not the worst. I mean, we know that the Public Advocate's Office put out their yearly list, and this year the worst landlord in the city was NYCHA. And we know NYCHA is terrible, and they have all sorts of problems. And these are new buildings, so they do not have the same. The heat is not shutting off, or they're not. The running water is not. They have. There's these things that we know NYCHA buildings go without sometimes, and that's not the case here. It's a little different situation, but yeah, the social services and the access to them is not up to par. I mean, and one of the biggest complaints...
That is a planning problem. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You have got to have these things in urban buildings, especially if you're looking at Section 8 tenants who may have some needs or other considerations when they move in. It is a reality of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the residents is, the people we spoke with, their main concerns is that there's no on-site super.
See, that's also... You're driving me nuts here. I got to go. No, but that's also, of course, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is also part of the plan.
I mean, he's within his legal rights to not have an on-site super.
That, of course, doesn't affect me at all. Whether it's I'm just allowed to editorialize as I want. Whether it's the law or not, you've got to do it, and you've got to do things right. Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they've got like a custodian who or they call him a super, but he works multiple buildings throughout the day. He's technically on call 24 hours, but residents complain about wait times and things like that.
Do you know how many apartments they have in that building?
There's about 100 per building.
So you just can't have 100 apartments where people are coming and going to work and living, and maybe you do have some people who are doing the wrong thing, where you don't have somebody. All right. Anything else to say about that? Because I do want to move on to.
No, it's an ongoing thing. We're going to try and keep up with it. And one thing we try to accomplish with this article that we maybe didn't accomplish with the first one is to examine that larger issue of the lack of social services, the lack of attention that these people get.
Well,
and, we want to follow that.
To heck with your analysis. Gary just told you the truth. You got to have it. Okay, next article. I mean, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just being me, but this kind of thing just drives me mad because there are really good developments in the Bronx that have these things, and then they don't run into these problems. All right, let's talk about the next thing. Apparently, I don't know if I'm giving it away, you are working on something about transit priorities of Assemblyman Jeff Dinowitz, who has been involved in fighting to improve our transit system for a long time.
Yeah, so I talked with Assemblyman Dinowitz yesterday for a story that should come out in the next couple of days, and one of his big...
At norwoodnews.org.
At norwoodnews.org. And one of the things he said was that, there's all this focus on, congestion pricing, for example. It's most likely going to be in the governor's budget. Congestion pricing is basically at a certain point in Midtown, if you're driving a car during certain hours, you'll be charged a toll, essentially. And, one of his things is that, that the focus seems to all be on Midtown Manhattan, and there's no focus on the outer boroughs or the outer reaches of the Bronx and of Brooklyn and Queens. And he talked about this thing called transit deserts, and it's basically places in the city where people have less access to transportation, public transportation, than other places. And there's a lot
certainly the folks in the East Bronx are right now raising their hands, saying, yes, I recognize that issue, and it goes. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he's trying to work on all the sorts of things, and not all of them are going to be accomplished this year. Not some of them might take 5 to 10 years, but he wants to get the ball rolling, and some of it involves rerouting. He talked about one bus. I forget which bus route. I think it was the 9 bus. He said it used to be called something else, but the route has been exactly the same since he was a kid. And Jeffrey Dinowitz is not a young man. So it's been a long time. I
will not tell him you said that.
Well, but he so he talked a lot about
So in other words, innovative things, having the transit system deal with change, deal with the development in the Bronx. But so let me do a couple of things on that. Number one, the MTA went about the Bronx and they asked input from bus riders about improving the transit. And we're getting, it was just announced in the mayor's State of the City, we're getting new transit options out in the East Bronx with a Throgs Neck launch for a ferry. And of course, there's been ongoing dialogue about getting 4 new Metro North stops in that East Bronx neighborhood that we talked about. So are we on the way to solving these kinds of problems?
Yeah, and I think So I think the 4 Metro North stations is something that everyone wants and everyone's trying to pursue. So Dinowitz is behind that. I know the mayor's behind that. One of the other things the mayor talked about was this transit signal priority, which is basically means that in a lot of areas where it's doable, it's feasible, buses would get essentially a longer green light than civilian cars or whatever.
So that they have a chance to get through the green light.
Exactly, and so because buses are big, buses have to stop frequently, and that can cause
so if they
traffic
stop,
jams.
and they, of course, I'll tell you, we could talk about this sort of thing for a very long time. I thought, and this came through the Giuliani administration, when they introduced the articulated buses, which instead of like this, they're like this. That was a problem, and it was a twofold problem because, number one, you got threefold, really. You got these big things rumbling down the block. Number two, you're running them. A lot of times I see them in the middle of the night, and there's nobody instead of one bus, there's 2 buses. And number three, you ate up parking spaces because every single stop along the way had to be enlarged. And so you lost maybe 3 parking spaces for people, which only makes things worse.
Absolutely, and the assemblyman said the same thing.
They're yelling at me that we got to go.
We got to go.
No, finish your
well, the assemblyman said the same thing. That he said that the double length buses take up too much space, they take up too much time, and it was basically an excuse for the MTA to hire less drivers, and that's not the solution.
Well, yeah, we could get into that. I don't know that that's the case.
All right, well,
but maybe he's right. Who knows? Joe Konig. People are going to see him in a different publication. We're not allowed to say which, but we're expecting to see bigger and better things all the time, and another appearance, at least 1, 2, 3, or 4 more on the Bronx Buzz.
As many as you want. Thanks, Gary.
All right, we'll be right back with Michael Benjamin in the New York Post. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. What a fun segment that was with Joe Konig. And right now we're going to go downtown via the telephone and say hello to our buddy, longtime buddy, Michael Benjamin, who is on the editorial board of the New York Post. Always nice to have you with us, Mr. Benjamin.
Always nice, Gary. Nice being with you.
Yep. I wanted to bring this up. I know you didn't want to talk at length about it, but I think it's worth talking about just to get started. The borough president announced the concept of having the city of New York take over the MTA, as opposed to, I guess it would be eliminating the authority and, in essence, letting us manage our own affairs. I think it's an interesting concept. I'm not sure I'm sold yet. I'm just curious if you had an opinion about that.
No, I'm not sold yet either, and this is also first as an issue raised by Council Speaker Corey Johnson, who said, I think within the next 45 days, he's coming out with a full plan to discuss what a city takeover of our buses and subways would look like. I think the city has enough trouble trying to properly educate school children and to house the homeless.
And to run their own housing authority, for goodness sake.
And to run the housing authority. I can't quite see trusting the city of New York to run the buses and subways. There's a reason why MTA was created in the first place, because the city could not run the buses and subways.
You are thinking exactly the way I'm thinking. Like, it's a really interesting concept, and I guess philosophically you always want to manage your own stuff. But, in terms of how well they've done and with other agencies, specifically housing and the homeless system, we have our own education problems as well. Saying, why don't you take over this? Boy, that's a tough one.
And as it is, in the last week or so, the governor has been talking more and more about wanting to have more fuller control of the MTA and therefore, New York City buses and subways. And if he's willing to take full responsibility, God bless him. At least we have somebody to point a finger at and blame, whether it's him or some future governor.
Yeah. I mean, on some levels, you say, well, it's like money. You need more money, and obviously we do, and maybe the governor is going to present congestion pricing as one of the possibilities there. But, we've said that about education and housing, too, that you just throw money at it. And certainly NYCHA, you could throw money at that, but I wouldn't trust them with $10 in their pocket.
But it's not just money. It's management. It's management culture. It's getting the work done and getting the work done for the best price possible in the least amount of time, and not deferring maintenance. The trouble with public housing, with the subways and other infrastructure, is that deferred maintenance pushed aside what should have been done regularly, and so now you have this cascade effect of things falling apart because they were not properly maintained and replaced on a timely schedule.
No question about it. Let's move on. You mentioned the governor. It's been an interesting time, certainly in recent memory, the only time I can remember legislators in the Bronx walking around saying, hey, we really got stuff done in Albany. Any highlights for you out of the range of things that have been passed? Voting reform? I thought that some of that was election reform. I thought some of that was great.
A lot of things were done early in this session, in the first few days of the session, which had not been done before. We had both chambers working legislation and passing it at the same time, and that's a good thing. The voting reforms are good ones. They've been long overdue. They've been passed in one House bills in the Assembly for quite a while now. The Senate Republicans have been blocking them, and now, under the leadership of Senate Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousins, we now have the Senate and the Assembly working in concert. Now it's for the governor to sign the legislation. But an interesting quirk when it comes to combining the state and federal and local elections on the same primary day, which will now be the fourth Tuesday in June. It means candidates who are running for public advocate on February 26th can begin circulating petitions for the June primary.
Because they're going to do it again, and actually, so this, I hadn't thought of that for this specific election. So, in a way, all it is for a 4-month job.
Yeah, technically a 10-month job, but yes, they're running the very next day.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, literally the very next day. Again, that's if the governor signs the bill as written and it takes effect this year. That's what could possibly happen.
That's a fascinating thing. Well, since you brought it up, what do you make of this public advocates field? Now, I will tell you, as somebody, as you well know, moderates debates in the Bronx, we very much would like to do a public advocate debate. I really have no idea how to manage 23 candidates. Number one, can I get them all in a room? And number two, how do you moderate a debate like that? I've moderated more than 65 of them, and I really don't know what I'm going to do.
It would be impossible. Imagine the chore for voters to decide among 23 candidates, many of whom don't have name recognition, and some of whom may not be able to raise enough money to get their name raised sufficiently in the next 3 weeks. Michael Blake, apparently, if things hold up the way they look, he could have $1 million for this race. A good chunk of it coming is with the 8-to-1 public match. You've got Jumaane Williams would have also over $1 million, with a good chunk of it coming from public matching money. I think because of the money they're raising, they would seem to be the top two contenders, plus Melissa Marcos Murillo having the name recognition. So I think the race is really between 3 or 4 candidates, and the others who are some members of the assembly and council. Yes, they're known, but only in their districts. They have a hard time unless they can raise themselves another $1 million.
Let's use Adonis Rodriguez as an example. He's a credible council member. I'm not even evaluating that. Does he honestly think? I mean, putting his name on the ballot. I mean, everybody they want recognition or whatever. Just using him as an example, does he honestly think he's got a chance to win that? On the other hand, having said that, with such a wide field, you don't need as many votes as you might have needed. No, you don't. One out of 23, you just need to get, 25% maybe, or maybe 15% of the vote in order to win. Yeah. And so let's use local Michael Blake as an example. Here's a Bronx guy who is well beloved. He's got a national reputation as well. He could go out and bring his district in to vote for him and carry the whole thing. Potentially. It's potentially as well, or Jumaane Williams can get the same 1 million votes he got for lieutenant governor. Turn that out, and he would win the public advocates race in a walk. Of course, that was a state race. That's probably going to happen. Yeah. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be turnout. There's been a lot of dialogue about eliminating the public advocate position. I don't see that as a viable concept now, but it's still out there. Why do we need Post. We've been pushing it. We've been pushing that line. There's an editorial probably coming out tomorrow. Well, coming out tomorrow. Oh, really? We're going to push the same line. The fact that Blake and Williams and others are getting huge amounts of public money to run for an office, we think is a waste of time and a waste of taxpayer resources. We think is an insult. Do you think having an ombudsman, so to speak, in that position? I guess the Post is coming out against it, but isn't that what the whole idea is, that somebody? Right, but it hasn't worked. But it hasn't worked as an ombudsman. Can you think of one thing any public advocate has done that functions as an ombudsman, helping New Yorkers deal with their own government and getting things done, moving things along? NYCHA is a mess. The public advocate should have been able to identify that early on and push the council, the state, and others, federal government, to do what was necessary to stabilize NYCHA and to not have the problems we're now told exist. And ombudsman would have found that out, would have advocated would have known that along the way beforehand. Especially since, if I remember correctly, in the last election, one of the clauses in one of the, I forgot what they called, in the proposals that voters voted on, were to talk about setting up kind of a communications division to inform people about different issues in the city and things that they need to know about. It kind of duplicates, in my mind, what the concept of, part of the concept of what a public advocate would do. You're convincing me on the spot here, Michael. I would agree with you. I would agree with you. The office hasn't lived up to its name. It's basically what the framers of the city charter in '89 were thinking when they said it was a stepping stone for minorities to be able to run credibly run for mayor of the city of New York. And of the 5 public advocates, all but one have run for a higher office. And the most recent one, Tish James, is now the state attorney general. Well, I was going to say, you've got 2 very high-profile ones. One is the attorney general. The other happens to be the mayor of the city of New York. Right. And neither one, as public advocate, put NYCHA on the list of the worst landlords. Michael, as a former assemblyman, you get the tone, you understand the tone in Albany. You also, on this program, we've talked a lot about Governor Cuomo and his various positions. Do you get the sense that he's going to move himself to the left? That's what some of the punditry is saying, is that the governor is going to start endorsing more so-called liberal or progressive concepts.
If you listen and read his State of the State address and budget plan, he is moving to the left. He's not moving to the to the far loony left, but he's moving to the left.
I'm not even going to address that.
Whether it's on renewables, it's on other issues, women's issues.
I was going to say reproductive rights and things like that.
A whole host of things he's moving to the left on, that things that he had been avoiding the last couple of years. I mean, I was most annoyed when he said that New York State is now liberated from the Republicans. So now there's a Democratic state Senate. And so he wants us to believe that for 8 years he was held hostage by Flanagan and the Republican majority.
Well, certainly in terms of his stance on a number of issues. We don't even have time to list them all now. That is not the case.
But he bulldozed the SAFE Act through a Republican Senate that, that are gun rights folks, that are NRA supported and supported by the state gun lobby, but yet he managed to get that done. A governor can get done whatever he or she wants. He chose not to do a number of liberal, progressive, left things during his 8 years. Now he's claiming he's free to do it because he now has Democrats at his back. That's baloney.
Do you think he's in the back of his mind, he's still thinking about running for president, and whatever he does is part of that resume? He knows now that anything he says is part of that?
Yeah, in the back of his mind. It's in the front of his mind. How do you act as your father's surrogate, your father's campaign manager, and not think constantly about the presidency and how your father blew his shot?
I try not to think of it in those terms because maybe I'm just naive and would rather people just think of, gee, am I fit for this? Can I achieve this? And, can I do a good job at it?
Yeah. Since I've run for office and I've been elected, you're always thinking about what you could possibly do next, or you have people next to you who are encouraging you to think about a higher office.
Next time you come on the show, I'm going to ask you if you ever thought you were going to be on the editorial board of the New York Post. Good. That was a good response. Michael, it's just always a pleasure to have you and to talk with somebody knowledgeable and passionate about what's going on. Take care and say hello to all our friends at the Post.
All right. Well, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
There you go. All right. What a fun show today. I love hanging out with Bronx journalists who have something to say. Great. So that's it. Monday night on Bronx Talk, a wonderful program about the White Shirt Project, which is a photographer who is doing things about mental issues, and we're going to show the pictures. Good night. See you.